Welcome back. Over the last 24 hours, we have seen reports that the president is prepared to drop his $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, which would have been used to pay people who were targeted by prosecutors under the Biden administration. That could include Tina Peters, the January 6th rioters, and others. Critics on both sides, including former Vice President Mike Pence, called the money a slush fund.
It's deeply offensive to me that you could have a fund that could even possibly compensate people who assaulted police officers or vandalized the Capitol on January 6th. And I think that's broadly held by most Republicans and most Americans.
9 News legal analyst Whitney Trailer is joining us now to talk more about this. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why would the Trump administration drop this fund now?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's political and legal. So politically, we've seen, as we just saw, the former vice president, the Republican vice president, was against this. And there's been so many Republicans that have come out, and of course, a plethora of Democrats. So I think politically it's been so unpopular, but they also had, I think, a legal out because the judge entered this temporary restraining order. So the judge said, nothing's going to happen with this fund. The money can't go into it. It can't be dispersed until we know that it's actually lawful. And essentially they're saying, the judge was saying, look, if the money goes in now and it gets dispersed, it's going to be difficult to reverse that if it is deemed to be incorrect. So the Trump administration has come out and said, well, we may not appeal it. And so they've alluded to, we're going to comply with the court's order, which, as we know with this administration, isn't always the case.
Right. So this all started when the president sued the Department of Justice and the IRS and reached a settlement. Even though Trump oversees the DOJ and the IRS, how does that work?
That's the question, right? It's essentially, and a lot of people were criticizing this, and we had a segment on this a few weeks ago, and I had the same criticism. He's essentially playing both sides of the argument. He's suing the IRS, in which he oversees. The DOJ, which he also has control over, is pursuing it. So in order to do this, he actually had to have his private attorneys represent him and his sons, who were the plaintiffs, and then the DOJ representing the IRS. So a lot of people are saying, you just negotiated with yourself. And that's a real criticism because the IRS never even actually responded to the lawsuit, which was filed 4 months ago. So there were just these kind of legal wranglings, and then they came up with this bizarre settlement of $1.776 billion.
What were the terms of the settlement?
Well, the terms were even interesting. So the plaintiffs in the case were the two sons, Trump's two eldest sons, the Trump organization, and him individually. So part of the settlement was the U.S. has to apologize to those plaintiffs. President Trump's tax returns can never be reviewed by the U.S. That was another term of the settlement. And then, of course, this fund that some people are calling a slush fund for people who have been attacked by or who have been attacked by the DOJ, but they specifically said Biden's DOJ. So the question was, all right, if somebody was attacked by a Republican DOJ, if they were weaponized in that regard, can they get access to the money? But the actual settlement specifies the Biden DOJ going, or the Biden administration going after people. So those were the broad terms of the settlement.
So what happens now?
Well, what happens now is we have until June 12th, and the judge, there were multiple lawsuits, but the actual lawsuit that was settled, one of the issues that the judge had was, is this truly a case or controversy? Meaning, are these parties actually adverse? And as I just explained, most people, including myself, don't think they're adverse. And so the judge had actually entered an order saying, I want to know how you all are adverse. Well, instead of responding to that, they settled the case. So now they do have to come forward on June 12th and say why this temporary restraining order shouldn't be permanent, how the parties are adverse. So they really have to show account. And I think there's going to be a problem on behalf of the presidents on the plaintiff side because there really was no case or controversy. And so that means those lawyers could actually get sanctioned and be in trouble.
So if this fund is deemed legal,
yes,
Could some of these folks, like Tina Peters and the January 6 rioters, be compensated? And I know that's kind of a tricky question because it's state and federal as well when it comes to Tina Peters.
It is a little bit tricky, but in another regard, it's not tricky. This is why people were so critical of this settlement, because it's supposed to be set up with a 5-person committee that only the president can appoint and remove without cause. So essentially that means they're going to do what he wants. What it takes for you to apply, how much you can get, how long it'll take before those funds are dispersed, those are all unknowns, and so that's a major issue, how this would actually work. And so that's the criticism that people have, is that there were no terms or conditions of this. So could Tina Peters and the January 6 folks receive money? The January 6 folks, I guess they could, because they were prosecuted by this federal agency. Tina Peters, I would say, wouldn't even be eligible because she wasn't persecuted or prosecuted by the DOJ. She was prosecuted by a Republican DA in Weld County and then ultimately convicted by a jury that ultimately went to the appeals court, who didn't reduce her sentence. They just said the judge needed to give additional reasoning for why he appointed that 9-year sentence. So I can't see how she could even possibly be qualified for this. But the Republicans that we've heard that were so critical said these folks who attacked officers, what we saw on January 6th, should not be rewarded. They already got their sentences commuted. So should taxpayers also pay them?
Right.
And so that's probably eligible, but it's a big criticism.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
As always, Whitney, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back.